point times projected earnings. That's according to Thomson Reuters. And again, that price there, on the 7th, they will announce their first quarter earnings. SBMC, the company said on April 8th that it's going to reduce its workforce before Bain Capital gets there. Cutting jobs resulting in a pre-tax charge of $33 million to $38 million. And they'll do some severances and, of course, redundancies there. That is a big deal since Bain was in the 2012 campaign. Another item here comes out of the state of South Carolina. There is the race there with Stanford, the former governor, and all about man around town, the guy that went supposedly on a hiking trail would end up in Argentina with someone other than his wife. Nonetheless, he's running against a lady named Cobert Bush, and according to the Washington Post, he could pull this out. It's a very close race, and in the last few days he's been closing. That's something you don't want to see if you're a political consultant. Not very good for the home team. A fast closer can always pull it out. And this is by the fix here. And in the last 48 hours, you want to at least hold your own and not. Nonetheless, this is a Republican district. There's no doubt about that. Not as many of the religious types there, but old Willard Romney won the fourth by 26 points. By 18 points. The first, this is the first district, isn't it? I'm sure I got the right. The first. Okay. By 18 points. Well, it doesn't matter, almost 20 points. It's a Republican district, there's no doubt about that. The Republican Party abandoned him because they didn't want to be associated with his shenanigans, because they had to look at their party on a national scene. And that in itself is very important. Charleston, of course, is the biggest of the 5 counties, and evidently old Stanford's been very strong there. Charleston County provided 44% of all the votes Stanford received. That was in the GOP primary. That's another race there, but nonetheless, Democrats took 60% of Charleston County. That was when Hodges beat then Governor Beasley, a Republican, but that was in 1998, a different world. Hodges won just 44% of Charleston County, a critical element to his loss to Stanford. Cobert Bush's campaign, according to this analysis, not separate herself from the National Democratic Party, which she cannot. She's standing on principles. And so Stanford went around running against Nancy Pelosi, who is from San Francisco. But that goes well in those kinds of places. And according to one guy here, Wetzel, a Stanford victory would speak loudly about a strong Republican-leaning district and reflect the reality that for the voters, political philosophy is more important than issues of perceived personal problems. Well, it is, it isn't. That's a double sword there, no doubt about it, because much of the Republican Party's rhetoric and the social values type is upon quote-unquote personal shortcomings, of what they perceive to be personal shortcomings. Billie Jean King was talking about that in some of the sports contracts at that. They had a so-called moral clause, and it was immoral if one came out and said they were gay. So thus that thing cuts both edges. A lot of hypocrisy involved in that, and no doubt there's hypocrisy involved with Stanford, because Stanford, in fact, if you had a moral clause on him, a so-called moral clause, he would never pass it. He would have been fired a long time ago. But to keep the right-wing flag going, so to speak, these people will go out and vote for him. Now, it will all depend on what she can get as an off-year election. These elections oft-time favor right-wingers, because usually they can get their troops out there. They are organized, and this is one thing we progressives have to guard against. the latest organization effort by President Obama's people is doing well in Texas, but not in other places. And part of the reason there, it's not getting the proper financial support. You simply don't put a grassroots organization out in 2013 and not give it, and this is in quotes, proper financial support, which means you have to fund the organization, you have to fund the functionaries. And beyond your major functionaries, that's your state organizer, you need to fund some more organizers. And you have to do that properly, because if you don't do it properly, you're wasting your time. And you're wasting time of the people. There was a time when you could have pro forma organizations, but it's not now. The political cycle now is 24/7, 365 days a year, 366 days depending on which year you're in. So the Democratic Party, the Obama organization, need to wake up to that. Also, they need to be very careful in what they do in this administration in terms of diversity, because they're not looking at the long term. They're down in terms of the people of color, specifically African Americans in this cabinet. They need to get that corrected in these policymakers. I think what they don't quite understand, at one time, the LBJ understood it when he set Thurgood Marshall literally in the chair in front of the door. But a lot of people don't comprehend that you simply cannot go with business as usual. You can't run a candidate, whether the candidate is an African American or not, and have a lily white background there. In many of the cities, some of these so-called mayors that they tap as being progressive, being liberal, have some of the most racist, preside over some of the most racist cities with some of the most racist policies out there. They are not called out on that, and that destroys the credibility of their party. There's no doubt about that. And not to have those people function, people look at the national government, i.e. the Obama administration, as a catalyst. And to not have the proper catalyst out there is a big mistake in the long term and in the short term. Although the president obviously is not running for re-election, but in 2016 it could come back to haunt the Democratic Party, because the old adage is what have you done for us lately? And they'll be in a position of not have done very much. So it doesn't matter whether they run the monster or they run Tony the Tiger. The same thing will be there. And in the off-year election next year, 14, you have to energize their base. And their base happens to be followers of one O.J. Simpson, the national hero. This is Boston Red on the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 6th day of May 2013, and as the Port Laureate of Newark, New Jersey, one L.A. Bill Graham would say, peace out, good day, have a good next week. Make it a productive one. Cheers.
Cash.com, South Carolina Radio, and the Citadel for inviting us here tonight for this very important conversation. And to you moderators, thank you very much for pulling this together for us. Thanks very much. Can you all hear me all right? Okay. What is my biggest accomplishment? 27 years ago, I began my career in business. And during that career, I started off making $6 an hour. When I was making $6 an hour with 3 small children, 3, 5, and 7, I knew that it was not going to be what I needed to have a successful life for me or for my children, be able to provide for my children. So what did I do? I went back to school. I finished my education. And when I finished that education, I found myself working at one of the top 10 global ocean carriers in the world, where I rose in the ranks from clerk to director of sales and marketing. I was responsible for 20% of the North America cotton's profit and revenue. And it was an incredible, incredible journey. What that did, though, what happened after that was it opened these incredible doors for me. I was recognized and became the first woman chairman of the South Carolina Maritime Association, and I was also named the top 20 most influential women in transportation. I did that by understanding business. I did that by understanding business plans and profit and revenue. I will take that tough, independent businesswoman, business career, and I'll go to Washington with the help of all of you. Thank you.
Governor Sanford, the same question. What do you consider your greatest professional accomplishment and why?
I would echo Elizabeth's thanks to every one of you for being here and participating in this, and to each of you as moderators and the citadel at large. I would say when you look at professional accomplishment, I would have to zero it in to really a 20-year track record of trying to do something about the way the government spends, and in particular leadership on that front. Because I think that a lot of people will talk about it, but all too few folks will actually lead on this sort of relentless pursuit that government has for your pocketbook or your wallet, and its implications in every one of our lives, whether on the job front or on the finances front. And I would look back to my time in Congress, and there was a short patch. Out of 40 years of history, a very short window wherein budgets were actually balanced in Washington, D.C., and I happened to be part of the class of 1994 that was instrumental in bringing that about. When I came into the governorship, there was $1 billion shortfall, and we were able to close it through a whole lot of work with others. And you combine all those efforts, and what they add up to is what the National Taxpayers Union talked about in rating me #1 in the entire United States Congress in efforts to limit federal spending and limit federal taxation. It adds up to Citizens Against Government Waste rating me the same in all of the United States Congress. It adds up to the Cato Institute rating me as the financially most conservative governor in the United States of America. It adds up to being the first governor in the United States of America to actually turn back stimulus money at a time when it was anything but popular. But I simply make those points to underscore a larger point, which is I think that if we're ever going to get our arms around a whole host of issues in Washington, D.C., what we need is leadership. And what has been shown in my time in Washington and in Columbia is a consistent willingness to lead on financial matters.
Thank you both very much. This first question is on the topic of immigration, and it goes first to you, Governor Sanford, and then you'll have a chance also to answer it with 1 minute each first. Senator Lindsey Graham and the bipartisan Gang of Eight has offered an immigration plan that offers a path to citizenship, rewards workers and researchers who have advanced skills, while mandating increased border security. Would you vote for the Graham bill? Why or why not?
I would not vote for the bill in its present form, and here's why. I think that we can all learn from history. It's that constant process of course correction by which we get things right. And if you look at the last big immigration bill in the United States of America, it was the Missoula-Simpson bill in 1986. And basically it offered amnesty for 3 million illegal workers in the country at that time for the trade-off of enforcement down the line. Ronald Reagan signed that bill into law in 1986, and unfortunately the enforcement part never came. As a result, here we are having a conversation years later with 11 million additional undocumented workers here in the United States. And so I think you simply have to reverse it, which is to say you have to begin with enforcement first before you begin any conversation on amnesty. And I think that there are some really simple nuts and bolt things that you can do. There was a 52-mile segment of the 2,000-mile border that was approached with a very high-tech border fence. I think a simple border fence, not high-tech, is the first step. And I think, and I'll get into it, I guess, in rebuttal because it's at stop now, but a whole host of other things that we can do that would, impact the degree to which illegals are wanting to come here.
Mrs. Colbert-Bush.
Well, first I'd like to say that I am in full support of the Chamber of Commerce and their position on immigration. This is very important that we understand that we have 11 million people here, and with our financial position right now in this country, we cannot afford to send 11 million people back home. What we need is really tough, fair,
impact the degree to which illegals are wanting to come here.
Mrs. Colbert-Bush.
Well, first I'd like to say that I am in full support of the Chamber of Commerce and their position on immigration. This is very important that we understand that we have 11 million people here, and with our financial position right now in this country, we cannot afford to send 11 million people back home. What we need is really tough, fair immigration reform, and that means you pay your taxes, you pay your fines, you learn to speak English, and you get in the back of the line for the pathway to citizenship.